Turning to major news on police reform, this year's protests have sparked pressure and some change, but rarely do protests force the kind of change that just went down in New York.
After growing calls for his resignation, Rochester's police chief and several high-ranking officers suddenly stepped down.
It appears the multiple resignations caught Rochester leaders off guard.
I am confirming that Chief Laurent Singletary today announced his retirement, along with Commando Morbido.
A police chief out, along with the command staff. This is sweeping change that didn't come days or weeks after a controversial police incident, and it didn't come after pressure from the top, like the mayor. No, this sweeping change was driven by two key factors: a damning video of police and protests. Activists mounting a relentless presence here in Rochester, you can see. Hundreds taking to the street night after night. The pressure ranged from marches and demonstrations of strength to also presentations by smaller groups during the day demanding justice for a new case where police responded to a mental health distress call by restraining and killing Daniel Prude, an unarmed black man.
How many more brothers got to die for society to understand that this needs to stop?
Daniel deserves justice.
We shall overcome.
Why are you out here? Because Black Lives Matter. End of story.
Or beginning of story, because these protests have been keeping up the pressure, moving the public. The mayor and the state attorney general has now paneled a grand jury to investigate this incident. So that's the pressure. Then there's the video. And I want to go through this very carefully with you. When Prude first died in March, the local police reports claimed he was taken into custody, quote, without incident, describing what sounded like some sort of routine force used to arrest and restrain him. And the reports say he became unresponsive and then was offered medical assistance before his death. Now, that official claim in Rochester, like in so many cases around the country, that was the only storyline for months. But it was contradicted by this newly released video that clearly shows police pressing Prude's face into the ground, putting the spit bag over his head, applying force to his head and back for several minutes.
Get on the ground.
Put your... No, great. I mean it. God bless y'all.
Give me that gun,
you're
not
gonna
me.
stay down. You're just
All right, take it.
No, I got it.
I mean,
I'm already in it.
try to kill me. It's easy to love it.
That's just a small excerpt, but everyone there in Rochester, everyone who watches the news can see what really happened. Now, police kept that video secret for months, the city hiding police's involvement in Prude's death, despite the medical examiner ruling that death a homicide. So even as this is a new story because of the video, the city always had this evidence in what was declared a homicide. So just think about what that means. The police there, the government, the mayor, they all had access to this evidence and either didn't do anything about it or completely avoided seeing it. Everything that's happening now, what I just showed you with the resignations, the street pressure, it's all based on this old secret evidence that finally went public. And the mayor there says the police chief kept her in the dark. If that's true, that's bad for the police chief, but it's also bad for the mayor. The buck stops with her, and her team has a duty to oversee the police and review this kind of evidence.
I also want to be very clear today about what I knew about Mr. Prude's death and when I knew it. Chief Singletary never informed me of the actions of his officers to forcibly restrain Mr. Prude.
The city also defends itself by blaming other New York authorities for allegedly preventing the video's release. But that doesn't even address the mayor's failure to privately look at that video. This is way broader than one city in New York State. It's a similar storyline where even there is not a police killing that might change everything, but rather eventually a video that comes out. So here's a question reasonable people might ask. What other first draft stories from police proved to be inaccurate or dead wrong? Remember Laquan McDonald? Police initially reported that he was lunging at them with a weapon. That was the first draft of history for months, and it was false. When the video you see on your screen finally came out, it showed McDonald walking away when over 16 shots were put into him. Or take Walter Scott. The officer who shot him initially claimed that Scott was posing a mortal threat. That was the first draft, but it was false. Video shows an unarmed Scott running away, clearly fleeing. The officer there you see armed and about to shoot. The officer then planted a taser near his dead body to frame him. That was also caught on video. It was not in the first draft police statement. That officer ultimately got 20 years for murder. False first drafts do not just arise in these shooting cases. This year, Buffalo police said, you see there, that 75-year-old protester simply tripped and fell out of the blue. But he was actually shoved by police and then spent a month in the hospital recovering from a brain injury and fractured skull. Now, why am I bringing this all up right now? There are parallels here to the Prude case because of misleading information from police and real questions of why a call for help turns violent, especially since it was Prude's own brother who called the police that ended up killing him.
Those in that I need to understand that I placed a phone call for my brother to get help, not for my brother to get lynched. Now, when I say got lynched, that was a full-fledged, ongoing murder, cold-blooded, none other than cold-blooded murder.
Prude made that fateful call, the brother you just heard from, because he was in a situation that he didn't think he could solve himself. His own brother acting very erratically, struggling with mental health. And Prude believed police would still help them. Just like a Utah mother who called police in an incident this week because she said her 13-year-old autistic son was having a mental crisis. Police ended up shooting the unarmed child as he ran away. He's now in serious condition with injuries to his intestines, bladder, shoulder, and ankles. You know, on the long list of police problems, which America's been discussing, this is a large one. About 1 in 4 people killed in police custody have evidence of mental illness. And people who do not get treatment are 7 times more likely to be killed by police interactions. Those are facts about police using force against individuals who really need doctors or treatment more than any punishment. And that's especially true in the case of unarmed individuals who, yes, may look erratic or unpredictable, may need to be restrained in some way, but are medically a greater danger to themselves than others. And these problems are compounded by inequities in healthcare and race in the United States. Black Americans have less access to quality mental health treatment, which brings us all the way back to the system. The incident in Rochester that led to actual change, to multiple police leadership resigning, it starts with what those officers did. But you peel back the layers and you find out why reformers emphasize not just the people in charge, but systemic racism and injustice. Because even when there was police video footage, it was suppressed. Even when there is diversity in city government leadership, as there is in Rochester, we still see a systemic model of policing through secrecy and cover-up that continues. So fixing policing requires more than police. It requires changing the inputs for policing, like investing in healthcare and treatment, reforming these years of unequal access to healthcare and the economics in the United States, as well as funding other first responders who are experts on addressing mental health crises before the guns come out. So here we are with another story, and it may sound like a lot. It may feel overwhelming. But as a matter of reporting, I can tell you tonight, the change here is already coming. In fact, you see it in this very case's timeline. Police killed Daniel Prude in March and hid the video. And it could have been one of those many stories where that false first draft is the only draft of history. But think about it like this. By the time this video came out, just this past week, authorities were actually forced to respond in a post-George Floyd America, where, yes, many things are the same, but many people are demanding those things change, leading to the ousting of the police chief and his command staff, and those new criminal probes in New York I mentioned, and a movement to apply the language of law and order back towards the police themselves. You know, there's talk of punishment, which is part of any justice system, but there's also talk of deterrence. As anyone in law enforcement will tell you, consequences deter crime. And more than anything, when it comes to the deterrence against killing the innocent or the unarmed or the mentally challenged, there is a movement demanding justice, so these things stop happening in the first place. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.